Okay, the Hangout on Air button says live, so I'm assuming that everybody at this Hangout can hear me as I'm speaking. My name is Andy Andres. I'm the instructor for Sabermetrics 101, the Introduction to Baseball Analytics. There are three people running this Hangouts on Air, myself and the two course coordinators. I'll let them introduce themselves, but briefly, we have two rock star course coordinators. They're both undergraduates at Tufts, and it's been my privilege to work with them to be able to bring this course to all the learners out there. So I'll let Ethan and Eric introduce themselves, and hopefully people will chime in with questions. We have a few things to cover, but why don't you guys introduce yourselves?
All right, I guess I'll go first. I'm Ethan Devine. Rising junior at Tufts and probably senior on the discussion forum. All right, Eric.
Smiley. I'm a rising senior at Tufts, and I'm sure you've read some of my comments in the discussion forum, and I hope they've been helpful.
So Eric is a Yankees fan. Ethan's
I'm a Red
Sox.
Sox.
Yeah, as evidenced by the pinstripes behind me show my Yankees.
Oh, good. I didn't notice that.
So.
Very nice. Pinstripes in your bedroom.
Yeah.
Who knew? But
Yeah.
So even though Ethan and Eric are great friends, they have a natural rivalry with the Red Sox and Yankees. So we'll start off with some of the questions that students asked before the Hangout. And one that got a lot of responses was this question here. Are there similar databases to the layman database for minor leagues, independent leagues, foreign leagues? And as much as they like Baseball Reference, this student asks, Kirsten Richards asks, she'd like to slice it and dice it her own way. There are probably databases, if you search around, that might be available to you, but there's nothing as comprehensive as probably you want it. Game Day is out there for minor leagues. Only a few years back, people have written scrapers to grab the Game Day data for all the minor league baseball data. If you go to places like the Baseball Cube, you can find good collegiate data, and they'll sell you their database. There is minor league data on Baseball Reference. You can sort of find databases for probably the Japanese league. It's just never as comprehensive as the layman database. And as we go further, you'll learn more about these other databases in baseball, the events files, RetroSheet, PitchFX databases in the past decade or so. These databases we'll be discussing much more in our next course, but in general, it's hard to find these databases beyond the layman database. I know people have done it themselves. These are programmers who've done their own scraping and cobbled their own data together. I'm sure the teams have a very tricked out set of data for their own translations between all the different leagues that play all over the world, all the different minor leagues, and how those data translate to professional and major league performance. But there's no easily accessible, at least to my knowledge, easily accessible databases as accessible as the layman database. I hope that helps.
And if anyone who's watching has a better answer than us, which would not surprise me, feel free to put it in as a question and we'll talk about it, because I'm sure some of you might have some knowledge that we don't have.
Yes, and I posted this under my handle on Twitter. I think I put it on hashtag Sabr101x. So if you reply there too, I'll watch the Twitter feed and we'll see if there's other questions there. But so hopefully that helps you, Kirsten, and the others who wanted that question. But we'll go to the next question. The next question by Kirsten is a cultural question. You see that? See that one, Ethan?
Okay, there we go.
Highlight that one so the people on can see. Anyway, So the question is from Kirsten Richards again. I guess this one is a cultural question. I don't really understand why there's so much fuss about the shift. Why isn't it standard operating procedure to put your defenders wherever you think they'll do the best job? Related, I want to look at how quickly batters adjust. This is actually a really interesting question. Shifting from 2011, shifting has sort of doubled every year approximately. A number of shifts in the number of plays in Major League Baseball. So teams are shifting more and more because they're seeing the run value of the shifting defense. There was an article recently in the Los Angeles Times. Let me not misquote it. Let me find it. The LA Times. The article was published July 19th this year by Zach Helfand, and the title is "Use of Defensive Shifts in Baseball is Spreading Because It Works." I'm sure if you Google it, you'll find it. But in the article, they talk about the data, the doubling of the number of shifts every year since 2011, and this year the same trend is following. And the run saved, according to BIS, so far, I read 190, yes. Data indicates, this is a quote from the article, data indicates the shifts are working throughout baseball. The strategy saved 190 runs in the first half this season, according to estimates from Baseball Info Solutions, BIS. BIS is the group that's really been driving the shift, the data shift, the data for baseball shifting, and so the shift works. I think that's pretty clear. It's harder to measure batting average changes, but the run saved seems to be evident. That's why you see more and more shifting going on. So your comment is exactly right, Kirsten. It should be standard operating procedure to put your defenders wherever you think they'll do the best job, and that's what analysts in the game for the different teams are figuring out. They're looking at hit charts, hit tendencies, and they're setting up defense appropriately. Now the adjustment question, your second question, is important. I mean, and the article mentions it briefly, but this is a standard story. I mean, why don't if you listen to talk radio, one, you'll rot your brain. So that's an editorial comment. All you talk radio, producers out there, I'm sorry. I take it back. I didn't mean it. But two, talk radio will say David Ortiz should just bunt or hit it to left field on the shift. Well, that's a lot harder than you think. Baseball's an awfully hard game. David Ortiz got to the major leagues by cranking on the baseball. The idea that he's going to sort of all of a sudden learn a new technique of going opposite, he could adjust, but if you walk in David Ortiz's shoes, you might say, I've done this my whole life. I'm going to hit it hard my whole life this way. I'm not going to become Ichiro Suzuki and try to slap it over there the whole time. Now, maybe he should, maybe he could, and, maybe it might even work. But in the mindset of the hitter, they want to hit the ball. This article in the Times goes on to talk about Pujols and Moises Alou. Pujols tried to bunt against the shift, and Moises Alou is quoted in the article. He says, it didn't work, the bunt didn't work. He tried to bunt, the bunt didn't work. And Moises Alou said, good hitters don't do that. Don't ever embarrass yourself like that anymore. So this is a one anecdote, but I think it captures the mindset of professional hitters. They crank. They crank on the ball, they try to crack, they try to really hit it hard. So it's hard for them to adjust. Long answer to say, adjustments are hard. They're not in the pattern of hitting on for these professional ball players, and the shifts are working. Ethan, Eric, what do you guys think?
Eric?
No, I agree for the most part. I think that it's a lot harder than people say it is to hit against the shift. I understand the frustration of fans watching and not understanding why players can't just hit the ball through the huge hole on the left side or the right side. But I think, as a rule, we kind of underestimate how hard the job that these athletes are doing. And I think that the shift is a natural strategy, and I'm kind of surprised it wasn't more prevalent sooner. It seems like such a basic idea to put more players where the ball is going to be hit, and I don't see it going away unless they create a rule for it anytime soon.
I think it's definitely true that it's harder than we think to bunt against the shift or just hit the opposite field especially. But I also think that some of it's definitely just players being stubborn, because you do see sometimes players bunting against the shift. And for the most part, they're relatively successful. Maybe it's because they're just doing it at times that they think they're going to get a fastball or something that's easier for them to bunt, or whatever, or they think if they did it more often it wouldn't work. But I do think that players could probably bunt against the shift more often, and maybe they don't understand that they should, or they're just stubborn and they don't want to.
So Ethan, can I volunteer you to go talk to Albert Pujols?
Yeah, I don't know about that. I think I'll defer to his judgment.
You think he might listen to a bunch of
maybe not
from Tufts and BU?
You never know.
Never know. Never know. Well, I don't make sure, if you're upset by my comment about talk radio, that you realize Ethan and Eric did not say that. I said that. It's not a course policy. It's my own small little opinion, and I apologize again for even bringing it up. So, next question on the list, Colin Myers. Oh, Colin, I think
we want to talk about the question that he was answering.
Yeah.
Talk about this.
Ethan, take it over. You got it.
All right. So this is the question. Basically, we've seen this question in the discussion forum several times. So basically, the question is that you're doing some sort of a group by. Maybe you're grouping by year ID. So you're getting, data from each year, and you're using generally a max. So you're saying say max of the home runs. So you're getting the number of home runs that the player who led the league in home runs that year did. So that's all great. So you get whoever led the league in home runs, you get how many home runs they hit. But what you probably want is the player ID to go with it. That's only a natural thing to want. The problem is that when you're doing a group by in SQL, every part of your select statement, except for the variable that you're grouping by, has to be an aggregate function. So let's say we're grouping by year ID. You can use the select statement, of course, because that's going to be the variable that identifies which year you're talking about. But the rest of them have to be an aggregate function, because if you don't use an aggregate function, what SQL is going to do, instead of taking the one that you think is natural or you think makes sense, SQL is just going to pick one at random. Or maybe it's going to pick the first one, depending on how you're doing your sorts and stuff. So it seems like it should be an obvious thing. You put player ID, max home runs. Why isn't it giving me Barry Bonds? The problem is that it's not that easy to do in SQL. You can do it with a subquery, but I think what makes more sense is to just get the data for the whole year and analyze it in something like R, which we'll be covering later in the course, or even just in Excel in a spreadsheet. And it's pretty easy to do a sort there, and then you can see it that way. I don't know if you guys have anything to add to that.
Oh, that was wonderful. No addition.
All right, we just got a question about Sabermetrics 2 course. Andy.
Oh, yeah. Yes. Let's take it. Dale Babcock asks, any thoughts about a Sabermetrics 2 course? Let's take that first. Yes, we think about it often. We will be offering it on the edX platform sometime in the fall. We wanted to run the Sabermetrics 101 course, the improved version. We wanted to get a sense of what was covered well, what we understood, what students really knew at the end of that, and really distinguish it from looking at events files and looking at the calculation and programming needed for calculating win expectancy, run expectancy by using all these events files. Having another chance to look more closely at the PitchFX database and what it tells us. So 201 is just a little more advanced programming to get at the PitchFX database, the events files, to understand some advanced sabermetrics. So, for example, we're going to cover the basics of fielding here in 101, but we're going to look now more at play-by-play data to get at measures of fielding in 201. So 201 is coming, and I think it really requires you to be pretty proficient at what's gone on in 101, the introduction. 201 is sort of advanced sabermetrics. Then you ask about long-term, would love to see a distance certificate sabermetrics from BU. Some sort of credentialing would be awesome, downright fun. But I'll take a Saber 2 course for now. Well, Saber 2 will be on the edX platform. That's in the works. Credentialing and a distance certificate in sabermetrics from BU is, I don't know, I'm trying to, let's be circumspect. Let's say that there's been discussions about it. There's nothing definite yet. There's preliminary discussions about a potential certification in sports analytics from BU. Whenever there is an official announcement around that, we can go ahead and do that, but nothing for sure yet. So thanks for your question, Dale. You're not alone. A lot of people are very interested in learning more fundamentals of data science using sports with the notion that they want to jump into this emerging field, this growing field of sports analytics. And hopefully we're teaching the fundamentals in Sabermetrics 101 to really be good at sports analytics. We'll teach more of the advanced knowledge required in Sabermetrics 201, and then we'll even do more work maybe on campus at BU to really shepherd the idea of real research in sabermetrics. So we'll figure it out. It's in the works. A lot of people are interested. Nothing definite or for sure yet. So we'll keep plugging away, though. It might happen.
All right, we could take this question about other sports. I don't have much to add, but I know Eric knows a little bit about basketball, analytics. Andy, maybe you know something else. Eric, you want to take this a little bit?
Sure. I mean, so talking about how can the concept of sabermetrics be applied to other sports. So I think that in general, baseball lends itself naturally to sabermetrics or sabermetric-like studies because of how many numbers there are, how long the game's been around, how much data we have, and how individual the game is in some ways. I mean, we can say that it's a team game, but a batter up at the plate is overwhelmingly an individual player at that point. There's very little team influence when you compare it to somebody like a basketball player or a football player who's really in a dynamic team environment almost at all times. There's very little. There's much less isolation in those sports. So I think that's the isolation and individuality of baseball is kind of a reason why sabermetrics took off first in baseball. But in every other sport, in every other team sport especially, they're trying to create these metrics that better value players. In basketball, there's a comparable WAR stat to the baseball one. It's a little bit less precise and a little bit less trusted because of the more team nature, so it's kind of hard to player performance. But I know that, especially in basketball and to a lesser extent soccer and football, there's definitely growing movements to try and better measure player value and create sabermetric-like equivalents in those sports.
That is definitely true. All sports are seeing the value that sabermetrics has added to winning the game of baseball, and they're advancing analytics and player movement, measuring where different events take place, where shots are taken. If you like basketball or hockey or soccer, you can easily see where shots are taken. People are recording that all the time now. In soccer analytics, they're really looking at set pieces and where shots take place and where shots are successful. Very similar in the NBA. It's been known for years that the worst shot is that shot right inside the three-point line.
Yeah.
It's 6 inches back. It's a much more value-added shot. Standard sort of knowledge in the game of in basketball. So all sports are doing that. Now, it's just harder, obviously, without the rich data set that existed in baseball, and then the technology that sort of led baseball analytics with PitchFX and with other advanced analytics. And you can't discount the project score sheet effort by the sabermetricians in the early 80s, really making this retrosheet events file legit and true. So they record the play-by-play data to get a much better way to analyze the game. If you follow the history track in this course, you'll see the crazy amount of work Alan Roth had to do, that George Lindsay had to do to get these early analytics. It's a lot of work because they did it by hand, just a few people, where spreading the workload with Project Scoresheet and building out this retrosheet events files database, huge in Sabermetrics circles, very, very important. So, but that kind of effort, that distributed workload effort, people really being serious about trying to answer questions, it's going to happen in all the other sports too.
And I would say it already is happening. I mean, I don't follow any other sports as much as I follow baseball for sure, but I would say one person, if you're interested in analytics of other sports, especially soccer and other things, to follow on Twitter is Christopher D. Long. He was an analyst with the Padres for a long time. Now he's a consultant in multiple sports. On Twitter, he's at OctOnion, OctOnion. He's always posting, data sets for soccer and other things on his GitHub. These are sports that, for example, like the Women's World Cup just happened. There's data out there, but people haven't necessarily done the analytics on it. And if you're interested in those sports, there's the data out there, and you could be the first one that ever looks at this. It's definitely, baseball's, the Sabermetrics has been around for a long time, but other sports are where baseball was 20, 30 years ago. Yeah. There's definitely a lot of room for more analytics there.
Yeah, and you can imagine all the professional sports leagues around the world. One thing that's happened is the emergence of a mini industry, and it's mini industry. It's 30 teams that have hired analysts and interns to help their teams in Major League Baseball. But beyond the 30 teams, there's another mini industry doing the public sabermetrics, Fangraphs, Baseball Reference, and all these other websites. But that's just one sport. Imagine all sports, professional sports leagues, understanding the value of analytics and data science to their winning games. There's a lot of soccer teams. There's a lot of professional soccer teams out there. And if there's an analytics revolution in soccer, there's going to be a lot of positions open for really smart people asking good questions and looking at soccer data to help answer those questions. So we're kind of at the forefront, I think, of the growth of sports analytics as a potential career. So I think it's gonna keep growing. So.
All right, should we take this question about math courses?
Which one is this?
I'll put it up. This is James Brooks. He's asking, if I want to continue along this path and take Sabr101x, can you give me a sequential order of math courses that would be valuable to have under my belt?
Why don't I let the students take that?
So I would say, as far as 201 goes, I mean, we're still working on it, but I don't think it's going to require any sort of advanced math courses. We want to make it, it's going to be maybe more difficult than 101 or more expansive and cover more programming and things, but we're not trying to make a course that you have to have a degree or anything to take. We want to make it available to people, and maybe there will be some, of course there's going to be statistical knowledge necessary for the course, and it's going to be helpful always. But in terms of more generally, if you want to do your own analytics and your own research, I would say definitely taking some math courses is going to be helpful. Just a basic stats course is number one. Maybe the methods in that course wouldn't be the most helpful for baseball, depending on what you're doing, but just getting to start working with some data like you're probably doing an intro stats course And just getting into a statistical mindset, I would say, is almost as important as having the tools. And the other course I would say, as far as basic courses that'll help you a lot, would be something like an econometrics or some other class that does a lot of regressions. That can definitely be helpful in baseball modeling or any other sport modeling. And getting different sorts of regressions and understanding how to interpret a regression, why you might not want to do a regression, those are going to be very helpful in doing your modeling. Do you guys have anything else to add to that?
Derek?
No, I really have nothing to add to that. I completely agree. You don't need to know a ton of math to get through these courses. You just have to know a little bit of stats, be willing to learn more stats, and having a base in programming is definitely useful, but I didn't have any when I first took it, and I still got through. It's really just about wanting to learn about baseball and taking the necessary steps, whether that's learning how to program or understanding statistics better. It's not about having a great knowledge base coming in any specific subject.
The one last additional comment I'd have is modeling. Now, it's not required for 201, but to really be good at answering questions, you've got to start thinking like a modeler. You've got to try to model the world in front of you and say, I think this is how it's all put together, and you have to try to quantify that. You have to do analytics on that. So there's great modeling courses in econometrics, in biology, there's biological modeling, there's probably modeling courses in stats and math departments. That's more like 301 stuff, but that's one thing to be thinking of. It helps to have this mindset of econometrics. Econometricians do this all the time. Ask a question, try to figure it out. An econometrician and a sabermetrician are very similar thinkers. So that's a parallel course to Sabermetrics 201 would be trying to find econometrics courses too. What do you think, Eric, Ethan?
Yeah, agreed for sure.
Yep, 100%.
What's the next question?
You're going to talk about the Bill James Sabermetrics definition.
Oh yeah, the definition of Sabermetrics. In the first week of the course, there was some discussion threads. I put up a quote of Bill James that he had in his on his website during a discussion. He's got Bill James online, and somebody was bringing up the question, what is sabermetrics? I went through all those videos and the content in the beginning and my view of what sabermetrics is. And to me, it's about the science of baseball. It's about trying to look at it as objectively as possible. I think Bill James would agree. He's got the same notion. You think about the game objectively, and you try to answer your questions. Always ask questions and answer your questions. Too much of what people think sabermetrics is, though, is hey, who's more valuable, Mike Trout or Bryce Harper? That is a fine question, but it's not the kind of question that's going to help the Washington Nationals win games or the Angels win games. The questions that really help you win games are the questions the sabermetrician should be asking. So there was one quote that was on the Bill James site. It's not about player evaluation. It's about big questions. I probably should have analyzed that quote more because Bill James does a lot of player analysis. He does. But you know what? When he's thinking like a sabermetrician, I really think he's thinking about the bigger questions, trying to answer the bigger questions. So in my mind, sabermetrics is about the objective look at the game. Try to be objective. Don't just take the conventional wisdom for what it's worth. So there was some confusion, but I think that if you re-listened to the whole sort of couple videos there about the definition of sabermetrics, I think you'd get a better sense for what I was trying to say about what sabermetrics is. And even though Bill James likes to rate players, he makes a buck or two off of it on his books and website. He knows It's about big questions. Now, maybe that causes a reaction to some of the people listening now on the Hangout, but and go ahead and ask your question here. But I think most sabermetricians I know who are really big thinkers, who are really sort of more thoughtful sabermetricians, they think about the game and try to answer questions about the game constantly. So that's what, to me, sabermetrics is.
I agree with that. I would just say that I don't think that the two, which is that player evaluation and answering big questions, I think they really go together. I think Bill James was trying to get at is that really what a sabermetrician's main goal should be is to discover something about the game. It could be small, it could be big. I was just thinking for an example would be something like linear weights. Linear weights is something that's definitely used for player evaluation. It comes from WOBA. There's all these different metrics. People use them all the time for player evaluation. But what does linear weights really tell you? It tells you how valuable is a single relative to a double, relative to a walk. If you look at it, and that's about why teams win. This team is walking a lot. How do you know if that's good, if that's bad? How valuable is a walk? You wouldn't know that without something like linear weights, or there's other ways of looking at it. But that linear weights was definitely, gives a lot of insight into the game, and that's why Pete Palmer and others developed it. It's not necessarily just for player ranking. It's because you learn something about the game.
Yep.
The next question that's popped up is, would you recommend getting an edX verified certificate in order to qualify for potential future credentials? Yeah. If you have a vision that you might want to take 201 and you want to do really well on it, and that you're fairly serious about this, like, yeah, I can see myself, I'm a numbers person, I like this idea, you want to push hard on this as a potential thing you really want to advance in your own knowledge, there might be value. Now, there might not. I guess it's a risk, right? I mean, who knows if someone ever is going to put out this idea, you need the 101 certificate, the 201 certificate. I'm not sure that's ever going to be true. There might be, it might be more important actually in 201 than 101 if this sort of certification process happens within Boston University. There's been some, when we've discussed it, we've thought about, yeah, maybe people need to be certified to be able to do more certification at BU. But trust me, edX certification is a fairly low bar. By low bar, I mean, I think it's $25. Don't quote me on that.
Yeah.
It's $25. So, look, there's no requirement that you get certified. There's nothing in the setup right now that is any certification yet. But if there is, we'll definitely lay out what it looks like. And there's a probability. There's a small probability. I don't know, something less than 50%, where the 101 might have to be certified. But this is something there's no certainty here, right?
It's low risk, high reward. It's like signing an injured pitch, like signing Rich Harden for so many years. Maybe he was going to be the Cy Young Rich Harden, but maybe not. But it's low risk because you're getting him for the veteran minimum.
Is this like Grady Sizemore, who just
it's signing Grady Sizemore. Let's hope that certificate doesn't hit 210 this year, but yeah.
Both the Red Sox, Phillies, and Rays have all decided that risk-reward play, and I think has he been released by all three teams? So
he's now on the Rays, so I think he's still on the Rays.
I think the Rays just released.
They released him.
Very possible.
Yeah,
I'm not Grady Sizemore hopes. Too bad.
Yeah. Okay, so the certificate might be important, but it might not, and that's a really awful answer for your question. So, next one that's popping up. Okay. You want to take Darren's question there, Ethan?
Sure. If you have a good answer.
I think the answer is no.
Yeah, unfortunately.
Yes, that's right.
He's asking about databases about physical capabilities like bench press, 40-yard sprint. I think, a little bit of this, mostly the running data you could get from, publicly available scouting data. I know Kylie McDaniel has been putting out 20/80 scouting grades for tools for tons of minor leaguers. So the run tool specifically can tell you a lot. That's basically, it's not measured directly just from the 40 or something, but it's measured from time out of the box. It's going to be pretty close, but I don't think there's any database that's going to have anything comprehensive like this.
I've not seen one.
Yeah. I don't think there is one, because it's not even, baseball doesn't even have a combine, an official combine like the NBA or NFL does. It's also so fluid. Kids are coming out of high school. Even if you knew somebody's 40-yard sprint coming out of high school, that has almost no relation to their 40-yard sprint at age 26. So it's just so hard to get all this information. Even listed weights on Baseball Reference, some of them are comically off. So I think you have to take all that kind of stuff with a grain of salt when you're trying to conduct a study on it. You would probably need to collect your own data in some way that hasn't been done before.
If you want to take this question, this is a bit of an older one about StatCast data.
I wanted the Billy Belt one.
Sure,
I'll put it up.
Okay.
I'll put it down. So this is about why MLB is not making or has not made StatCast data fully available to the public. So what is available, if you go to baseballsavant.com, you can see leaderboards for batted ball velocity and max batted ball velocity and things like that. And you can actually go in and download the data for every pitch for what hits available on Baseball Savant. And you can also see, if you look at the MLB at Bat app while you're following a game, and you look at the feed section, you'll see the same data popping up. So that's what is available. So the question is, why isn't more available? I think it's the same reason we didn't see, for example, teams have had HitFX data, which has had a lot of these same variables available as far as like exit velocity and angle. Teams have had that for several years now, and it's not being released to the public. You'd think, well, every team has it available to it, so why not just release it to the public? But I think some teams think that they can do better than other teams in analyzing that data. Like I remember at Saber seminar last year, Tom Tippett, who's the analyst for the Red Sox, was talking about, someone asked him about this data becoming public, and he was like, well, we don't want it to become public because we think we're doing better than everyone else in analyzing it. So that might be some reason for MLB teams to not release it. But the other thing is, I think that it's just an early data set, and I think they will be releasing more. I don't know if anyone has a better answer for that, but I think maybe next year, hopefully, we might get some more, especially some of this batted ball velocity stuff.
Yeah, I think the people working on this for Major League Baseball, the people from Chiron Higo, the video analysts, and the TrackMan analyst, the radar analysts, are all working together to sort of hone in on there's a lot of data collected, and they're honing in on the right data that teams might want. And there's no doubt some teams feel they can get a competitive advantage if they're the first and best to analyze it. That is certainly true. A lot of teams are, I guess they're privately saying they think they can do that, or publicly saying it. But it probably won't be fully released like the PitchFX data was on game day. At least not for a while. Not until teams have had a good shot at it, and the people working on it right now, the people from Chiron Higo and TrackMan and Major League Baseball Advanced Media, have honed in on exactly what they're looking for. So it may be a while.
All right. Do you want to take this Fullerton question, Andy?
Fullerton. Let me see. What was the analytic work done? Bunts, stolen bases by Fullerton used by teams to adjust tactics, strategies? No, there's no evidence it was. Not that I've ever seen. Now it's a good question to investigate, to see if teams ever looked at this. You got to remember, 100 years ago, everything was in newspapers. Okay, so Fullerton's writing in a newspaper, and it's not, just like there's tons of websites today writing about baseball. I'm not sure that teams are like surfing every single website for every single idea. They probably teams are paying attention to good sabermetrics that are done in the public. They were probably paying attention to good sabermetrics that Fullerton offered over 100 years ago. But I've not seen any evidence that a team responded at all to Fullerton's writings. Good question, though. I mean, if we write a book on Fullerton, it's definitely a question we're going to have to try to answer. So when Eric, I'm going to get Eric to write this book, and
Yeah.
he's going to have to answer this question before we go to the publisher.
I will do that. I'll definitely do that.
Next question.
Where are we going here?
You decide, Ethan. Pop one up and
All right. Well, I guess we can talk about this one here. What factors or statistics do you think are most important to analyze a game on a given day for betting, for example? I mean, I don't know if any of us are the most qualified to answer this question. I don't do betting or DFS, daily fantasy sports, which I know are big now. But I guess if you were going to do that and you wanted to look at statistics, I would say it's definitely a different beast to look at a daily game as opposed to if you're just looking for a season. Because if you're looking for analytics on a whole season's data, a lot of these things are going to cancel out. A guy's going to face, average opponents over the course of the whole year, or roughly average parks, or except for this home park. But if you're looking for a single game, these things aren't going to cancel out at all. If you're facing Felix Hernandez on one day, that's going to make a huge difference. So I'd say, opposing pitching is huge. Park is huge. Weather is also huge. Andy, I know, has done some work on weather. Maybe you can talk about that a little more. Batter-pitcher handedness is going to also play in a lot.
You actually can do some basic stuff for daily games, but it's mostly around who's pitching.
Yeah.
Okay, so teams and batters have splits, but not only splits just lefty-righty, but pitcher type. Okay, is this guy a power pitcher or a more of a junk ball pitcher? What's their pitch type? Mix. And certain batters do better against different pitch type mix. So Vince Gennaro has done some excellent work clustering pitchers into pitcher types around this stuff, like power pitcher, finesse and pitch types mix. And the clustering of these pitchers might mean, hey, this guy always hits a Cole Hamels type. Well, the next time that you face a guy in that cluster, you might say, oh, when the Astros play the Phillies, those Astros actually hit that Cole Hamels cluster pretty well. And this is where you get slight advantages in predictability about a game. But it's advanced analytics, and the first step is just to look at a pitcher. Are you facing Zach Greinke? Well, don't bet against Zach Greinke. How's that? That's good advice right there. Zach Greinke's in fuego, so he's going to probably stay in fuego for a while. So I wouldn't bet against Zach Greinke, and I wouldn't bet against Mike Trout. I mean, the Angels lineup is hot. Certain lineups start scoring runs, and they start running on, all cylinders, and all these things make slight differences. So I'm not about to start really doing the advanced analytics on day-to-day games, but there's something there you can start with, I think. First and foremost, don't bet against Zach Greinke.
All right, I think this question is a good question. I don't know if we have a good answer, but this is about agents. Given that player agents can't charge minor league players fees beyond, getting a chunk of the signing bonus, do you think agents are looking at sabermetrics to find clients? Andy, do you have a good answer to this question?
I think they're looking at it, but Imagine you're an agent. You're Scott Boras. Scott Boras has hired some analysts, but Scott Boras just wants to sign guys.
Yeah.
Now, the goal is to sign the guy who's going to get the big money. Well, how do you sign the guy to get the big money? You're Scott Boras. You have a history of signing guys that get big money. That's your game. His game is to be good at his job, so he signs the next big client. I think there's some analytics you can do with that job. I really do. I think that there's questions you can do about that work to identify certain players, but it's a different sort of line of work than the general manager of the Phillies. The general manager of the Phillies is trying to win games for the Phillies. So he's putting pieces together, trades, signings, draft picks, free agency. And that effort, that mix of all his work there is what he's doing to win games. There's really good analytics to drive his decision making. Scott Boras just wants to sign the next. Is David Price Scott Boras? I want to be David Price's agent. Okay.
I believe he is.
So is he really? Well, perfect.
Yeah.
Then Scott Boras wins. I mean, the whole game is to sign David Price, right? That's the game.
I think Scott Boras could sign me as a client, and he would get me like a $20 million contract. So I think there's some I agree. I think agents look at some stats to figure out which players they're going to sign, but in general, teams are a victim of finite resources. The Phillies can't sign 5,000 players because they don't have the money or the roster space. An agent can sign a lot of people and hope that some of them pan out. So I think it's a much different process than teams go through.
I would say that that's definitely true, but maybe the agent should be looking at more sabermetrics because, there is a cost to an agent to having a client. They have to,
right.
Some of it's time, have to meet with them, and they have to get them sponsorships, and it doesn't cost them maybe a lot of money compared to what they'll get out of a signing bonus or definitely out of a free agent contract. But if you're talking about a guy who ends up being a career minor leaguer, maybe he sticks around 7 years or something, after the signing bonus, he's not making the agent any money at all. And if you're signing a lot of those, that could get costly. And even if a guy does make the major leagues, he's not going to get paid. The agent's not going to get paid until the player's in his fourth year and he makes it to arbitration. He's not going to get paid a lot until free agency, which is several years away. So I think maybe there is room for agents to use their metrics a little more than they already are.
Just as a follow-up, I would say that to the extent that they want to analyze their job, what they do as agents, they would sit there and observe it, ask questions, try to measure something, and then move forward. I would say that's the job of the scientist, that's the job of the sabermetrician, and that's the job of the agent analyst, whoever that agent analyst is. Any system can suffer a good look and close observation and a real thoughtful generation of questions and follow through on those questions to try to get at answers to improve whatever it is, being an agent or being a GM of the Phillies, whatever you're looking at. So yes, of course it could use some more analytics, I think. Just like being a professor. No one's laughing. Usually I get some laughter with that one, but
Crowd.
Tough crowd.
Right,
you want to do the Billy Butler question?
Sure.
Billy Butler is only 29. Are there any analytics that explain how he has managed to freeze himself in time? I didn't realize Billy Butler was frozen.
Yeah. Speaking of 40 and 60-yard dash times, I would be curious to know Billy Butler's.
Who's slower, Billy Butler or Albert Pujols?
Billy Butler.
Billy Butler.
Who's slower, Billy Butler or David Ortiz?
Oh. David Ortiz.
Who's slower, Billy Butler or Alex Rodriguez?
I don't think A-Rod's that slow. I think he doesn't run because he can't anymore. I think if he was running from a bear, he could run faster than Billy Butler. But on a baseball field, I'll take Billy Butler.
That's funny. We're gonna Ethan, right? We're gonna have to go to YouTube. Get that quote right there, and put it on a banner somewhere on the course. That's perfect.
All right, I'll do that.
And then Ethan, as a FIP lover yourself, do you want to take the next
All
question?
right, let's take this.
Oh, my FIP questions. Wonderful.
Oh, yes, Andy's favorite metric. So the question is, why is FIP and XFIP so valued by the analytics community? James says it's inherently flawed, it penalizes fly ball pitchers, and does not hold ground ball pitchers as accountable. Well, I would say as far as fly ball, ground ball pitcher goes, ground balls are good. Being a ground ball pitcher, all else equal, is generally better than being a fly ball pitcher, mostly because ground balls don't go over the fence, and they don't end up as extra base hits very often. So I would say that's a good thing about FIP and XFIP, not a bad thing. But I would say we're going to cover this in Module 4, so maybe that'll clear it up a little bit. But the real value in FIP is that it gets down to what a pitcher has sole control over: strikeouts, walks, and home runs. Nobody else on the defense, for the most part, is a part of the strikeouts, the walks, and the home runs. Once you start talking about balls in play, you start getting defense involved. So that's one reason why FIP is valuable, is that it isolates just what the pitcher has sole control of. And the other thing is that as far as balls in play go, there's research been shown that pitchers, it's the range of skill of pitchers in preventing hits and balls in play, BABIP or whatever you want to call it, it's pretty small. There's not really that many pitchers who can, induce weak contact consistently over several years significantly. There's definitely some skill. Guys like Jared Weaver or Matt Cain for several years, they do pitch in certain ways that they can beat their FIPs consistently. But it's relatively small in FIP. When you only have, say, a year, it's definitely smart to bet on FIP over to bet on the ERA or something.
Yeah.
Anything else you want to add, Andy? You want to?
I would agree. FIP greater than sign ERA.
Oh, okay. At least we have that.
At least we have that. ERA is got some flaws, as does FIP, but stay tuned if you're really interested in this question. I think FIP is a really important concept to get at what Ethan just said. It's a much better measure of what the pitcher is actually trying to do than ERA.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think the most important thing is not to focus necessarily on the number of FIP. I mean, which is of course valuable and it weights it correctly, but it's really the fact that pitching is mostly about getting strikeouts and limiting walks and limiting your home runs. And that's just something that maybe if you're just starting from scratch and you don't you wouldn't necessarily think about those things. You think, well, there's the hits and there's so many things involved in it, but those things are the most important things. And
this is where I'm going to disagree a little bit, just a little, quietly, very quietly. Maybe I shouldn't. Pitching is not about strikeouts, walks, and home runs necessarily. It's better than earned runs for sure. But in my view, pitching is about location, break, velocity, and delta velocity for certain pitches. So this is where we kind of go back and forth. This is why we have many internal debates about these things. I think FIP is like I said, there's a lot of ERA estimators out there like FIP that look at some fundamentals like strikeout rates, walk rates, home run rates, ground ball rates. We're taking these fundamental measurements to get at the value of the pitcher is much better than ERA. Full stop. I'm done.
Okay.
all right. Anything else we want to cover?
Sure.
5 minutes left.
What's this? I'm trying to think. There's not many other questions, really.
Well, I'll say that we're going to try and do these more often. This is a little bit of a small one. Hopefully, we're going to try and do one. I think another one next week. We'll send out the date, I believe, in an email. Hopefully, we can get some more questions ahead of time. Although I think this went pretty well. if we didn't get to any of your questions, or if you just forgot to ask them, feel free to put them in for next time. And I hope you enjoyed this.
Yeah, and hope you're enjoying the course so far. Remember, we're monitoring the discussion forums. Let me check if Twitter had anything to say. I think there's a couple questions here. Let me just, you got what you want to wrap up here? Oh no, we're just getting thank yous, that's all.
I always love thank yous. And just keep in mind when you're going through the course, anytime you see a bug or something wrong, that was probably Ethan. And anytime you like something about the course, you can give me credit. And then just keep on going through the course in that manner, and I think you'll do all right.
Oh, Ethan, I'm sorry, Ethan, you threw it under the bus. You know what? You guys can both throw me under the bus. That's true.
If something's wrong, it's probably Andy's fault.
It's probably my fault, and I'm the biggest guy, so when the bus rolls over me, I'm going to get up, dust myself off, and we'll be fine.
Yep.
Any other questions?
I think we're good.
All right.
There's 2 Andys now. All right, are we good?
I think we're good. It still says live, Ethan.